The bells begin before the sky has decided whether it will be night or day. They wake the town not with urgency, but with inevitability, their iron voices rolling through fog that clings low to ground like a reluctant spirit. Each toll vibrates through stone walls and wooden beams, through bones still heavy with sleep. The sound is old, older than any living person who hears it, and it carries with a command that cannot be refused. Wake! Remember where you are. Remember what you are. The street lies narrow and crooked, its surface a hardened mix of mud, refuse, and frozen memory. Waste from kitchens and stables has been tossed here for generations, pressed into ruts by cartwheels and boots worn thin at the sole. In winter, it freezes into ridges sharp enough to cut skin. In warmer months, it softens into something that smells of rot and resignation. Shuttered windows line the way. Though it's swollen and darkened by rain, breathing out faint strands of smoke that drift upward and vanish. The town exhales slowly, like a body that has learned not to move too suddenly. Behind one such window, a woman wakes. She does not rise at once. Rising too quickly invites dizziness, and dizziness invites mistakes. Instead, she listens, the bells first, then the sounds beneath them, a distant cough, thin and persistent, the scrape of a neighbor's door opening, the soft scuttle of something small moving along the wall. Her bed is straw laid over boards, the stalks poking through linen worn, almost translucent by use. The cold has settled deep into the room, and it lives there now, an unwelcome but permanent companion. She draws her cloak closer, the wool ruff against her cheek, and waits for her breath to steady. In this world, listening is safer than acting. Bells can mean prayer, but they can also mean warning. They can mean death or judgment, or simply the passage of another hour she must survive. Today, they call the faithful to matins, but they also count the living. Each morning is an unspoken reckoning of who has not answered the sound. She crosses herself before standing, fingers stiff as they trace the sign learned in childhood. The words come automatically, Latin shaped by a mouth that does not understand it. Few here do. The language belongs to God and to men who wear authority like armor. Meaning is less important than obedience. The woman knows the rhythm well enough to keep pace, and that is usually enough. Her feet find the floor, cold biting through skin. She dresses in layers repaired so many times that the original cloth is only a suggestion beneath patches. The smell of damp wool and old smoke clings to everything she owns. There is no fire yet. Fuel is precious, and morning cold must be endured before it can be challenged. She ties her hair back with a strip of faded cloth and lifts the latch on her door. The street receives her without warmth. Fog beads on her lashes, and her breath forms small, brief clouds that disappear almost as soon as they appear. Others move quietly, wrapped and hunched, careful not to draw attention. Attention is dangerous. It invites questions, and questions are rarely asked without purpose. A cart creaks past, its wheels protesting, driven by a man whose face is already set into the shape of fatigue. The well stands at the center of the square, its stone rim slick with moisture and history. She joins a small gathering there, each person waiting their turn in silence, broken only by the groan of the rope and the splash of the bucket below. The water smells faintly of iron. Sometimes it tastes of sickness. She makes the sign of the cross again before drinking, not out of pure faith, but out of habit shaped by fear. People have died after drinking from this well. Others have lived. No one can say why. Children linger near their mothers, thin arms wrapped around themselves. Their coughs echo too loudly in the morning air, sharp sounds that draw uneasy glances. Illness is spoken of carefully here, if at all. To name it feels like summoning it, and no one wants to be the one who invited death into the square. A woman nearby murmurs a prayer under her breath, fingers moving over a string of wooden beads worn smooth by repetition. Bread is eaten standing, dark loaves heavy with chaff and ground coarse enough to crack teeth. It fills the stomach, but offers little comfort. Hunger is a constant, an old ache that never quite leaves. It has shaped bodies and tempers, taught people what can be endured. The woman eats slowly, mindful of every crumb. Waste is a sin, but it is also a luxury no one can afford. When the bells call again, she follows the others toward the church. The building rises from the fog like something grown rather than built, stone damp and dark, its entrance scarred by time and touch. Inside, the nave smells of tallow, wet wool, and old incense ground into the very mortar. Candles flicker, their flames unsteady, wax dripping in pale trails down iron holders. Light here is fragile, easily swallowed by shadow. They kneel on stone worn smooth by centuries of devotion, knees aching, backs bent. The words of prayer fill the space, rising and falling like breath, Latin syllables layered over local murmurs. The woman speaks them quietly, careful not to be noticed for error. Mistakes invite correction, and correction can be humiliating or worse. Confession comes next, whispered through a wooden screen darkened by oil and touch. She lists her sins in the order expected of her, small transgressions shaped to fit the ritual. The priest listens without seeing her face, his voice measured as he assigns penance. Guilt here is not merely an emotion. It is a discipline. It is taught, cultivated, used to keep people in their place. It settles on shoulders like an invisible weight, bending spines and lowering eyes. Outside again, the day struggles into existence. The fog thins but does not disappear. Work begins because it must. The woman joins others in tasks that blur together. Mending, cleaning, caring, enduring. Time is marked by bells, by hunger, by the slow passage of light across stone walls. Conversation is sparse, cautious. Words can be overheard. Words can travel. By midday, the air carries the smell of cooking from a nearby hall, richer scents drifting outward only to remind those outside of what they will not taste. Power lives behind thick doors, beneath high roofs. Those who serve move like shadows, trained to be quiet, to anticipate needs before they are voiced. The woman watches them from a distance, knowing better than to envy openly. Envy is dangerous. It invites scrutiny. As the sun lowers, the cold returns with renewed purpose. Fires are lit reluctantly, smoke curling upward, finding every crack. Evening brings a different tension. Darkness hides many things, but it also reveals others. Doors are barred with beams scarred by old blows, reminders of past fear. Dogs bark at nothing or at everything. Somewhere, a man shouts, his voice thick with drink and anger. Somewhere else, a baby cries, thin and relentless. Inside her room, the woman eats again what little remains. She worries the frayed edge of her cloak between her fingers, the motion soothing in its familiarity. It is not a rosary, but it serves the same purpose. She listens as night settles fully, as the town exhales and holds its breath. Sleep comes in pieces. Dreams are restless, filled with falling in pursuit, with bells that never stop ringing. In her dreams, doors close too slowly or not at all. Faces appear and vanish. When she wakes, heart racing, she lies still, waiting for the fear to pass. It always does, eventually. Fear is another thing she has learned to endure. Before sleep claims her again, she thinks of the morning to come, of the bells that will wake her whether she is ready or not. In this world, survival is quiet. It is knowing when to speak and when to disappear. To be unseen is often mercy. To be seen too clearly can be a sentence. The bells will ring. They always do, and she will listen first, as she always has, because listening is how one remains alive in a world that remembers everything and forgives very little. Morning light enters the hall slowly, hesitant as though it fears the weight it must illuminate. Thin and pale, it brushes over the grooves and scars in the oak tables, polished by generations of elbows and knuckles, each groove a memory pressed into the grain. Shadows cling stubbornly to corners, where the stone floor meets the walls, and whisper secrets of lives long forgotten. The air smells of boiled grain, sweat, and a faint tang of mead, heavy enough that it seems to coat the skin of those present, marking them with their place in the hierarchy before a word is spoken. The hall is a world unto itself, one of rules and observation, where every gesture carries meaning. A raised dais signals power, a lowered gaze communicates obedience. Benches creak under bodies that have learned restraint, the kind that forms as much from habit as from fear. The Lord sits at the highest point, hands clean, rings heavy with polished stones that have traveled long roads the villagers will never see. Authority here is not loud. It is assumed, felt in the air and in the silence, understood even before spoken. The boy enters, carrying trenchers from a hearth. His fingers are raw and stiff from frost and long hours of labor. He knows where to look and where not to look. He moves like a shadow, unnoticed yet necessary. The plates are set. The food is distributed. Some of it is burned at the edges, some undercooked. A bit of charred crust is as much a lesson as it is nourishment. Learn to accept what comes. Learn to endure. Learn that comfort is fleeting. Beyond the hall, the village bends under the same discipline. Fields lie stiff with frost. Plows idle. Oxen breath clouds into the air as they wait for labor that will resume at the mercy of daylight and endurance. Women barter eggs for salt, for candlelight, for moment of safety. Each transaction a small assertion of agency against a world that measures worth in coin and compliance. Children move cautiously, guided by whispered admonitions, by the memory of older siblings punished for speaking too freely. Every interaction is a subtle negotiation with survival. Law travels slowly here. Sealed parchments move from lord to lord, village to village, carrying orders and judgments shaped more by circumstance than by morality. Justice is uneven, shaped by literacy and wealth, by who can read and who must trust the reading. A stolen loaf may cost a hand. A stolen life may be pardoned with coin. Every act carries consequences that are disproportionate, often invisible until they strike. Inside the hall, conversation is measured, brief. Words are chosen as carefully as the steps one takes across the frost-hardened street. Gossip is both weapon and currency. The wrong syllable can make or break a family. The boy moves among them, listening, learning. Some words float through the air like smoke, temporary, insubstantial. Others sink like stones into the memory of those who hear them. He does not yet know which will matter, but he watches and remembers, as all who survive here must. Meal ends, and with it, the hall empties in layers, a slow peeling away of lives constrained and observed. Those left behind clean and rearrange, polishing surfaces that will hold new marks of age and usage. Silence follows the departing feet, punctuated by occasional creaks and the scrape of chair legs against stone. Every sound is a reminder that walls have ears, even when no one stands behind them. Outside, the day stretches forward reluctantly. Smoke from chimneys mingles with the mist, curling in uncertain fingers through the streets. The cold is insistent, seeping through gloves and cloaks, settling in joints. Women kneel to sweep steps or tend small gardens. Children gather firewood. Men check fences and roofs. The repetition of tasks both rhythmic and wearying. Life is an ongoing negotiation with the elements, with hunger, with obligation. No one questions the repetition. It is as natural as breathing. The stocks stand in the village square, dark with weathered and cracked, heavy with the memory of punishment. Shame here is public, a lesson drilled into bodies and minds alike. A child sees a neighbor bound for theft and learns early the value of compliance. Adults pass by silently, averted eyes a gesture of civility or fear. Justice in this age is not abstract. It is tangible, physical, and deeply symbolic. The wood remembers. The ropes remember. The faces of those displayed are etched into the memory of the living. The lord returns to the hall as the sun drops, his cloak dusted with frost. His presence carries authority, a reminder of the hierarchy that governs everything from law to sustenance to prayer. Servants scurry to arrange his seat, to lay out bowls and goblets, to ensure that nothing is amiss. Attention is paid not to the comfort of the Lord, but to the acknowledgement of his power. The boy watches quietly, recognizing patterns he cannot yet name. Observation is his inheritance. Patience is lesson. As the final meal of the day is prepared, the hall takes on a different character. The warmth from the hearth is uneven, spilling over some faces and leaving others in shadow. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread is a tantalizing reminder of scarcity elsewhere. Every bite consumed carries with it an unspoken acknowledgement of privilege and of survival elsewhere. The rich are fed abundantly. The poor taste the crumbs, and even crumbs are precious. Night approaches with deliberate inevitability. The hall empties, and doors are barred against the cold and against what may come. Animals settle in stables. Fires are banked, and the villagers retreat into small rooms, each space measured and confined. The boy curls on the floor near the hearth, warmth teasing the edges of his awareness. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by coughing children, the howl of distant dogs, or the shriek of the wind against shutters. Dreams are not gentle. They echo the waking world, sharp, cold, and unrelenting. In the dim candlelight, the boy recalls the lessons of the day. Hierarchy is survival, obedience is safety, and knowledge, what little is allowed, is power only if wielded carefully. He remembers the smell of bread, the sound of the stocks, the heavy toll of bells that mark the passage of hours and expectations. He recalls faces and gestures, learned from observation, storing them in memory for the future, as if each small fact is a seed of protection. Outside, the village sleeps in uneasy rhythm. Fog clings to the earth, curling around fences, walls, and trees. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the scent of warmth, of cooking, of survival. Even the air seems alive, imbued with a mixture of fear, endurance, and habit that have been passed down through generations. Each person sleeps in their own way, some with eyes half open, others dreamless and exhausted. All are subject to the same relentless measure of time and circumstance. The bells will toll again, of course. They will mark the hours, summon the faithful, and remind all who hear them of what has been lived and what is demanded. In their sound, there is a history that cannot be denied, a story older than the town itself. The boy, lying on the floor, fingers still pressed to the edge of his cloak, listens. In the cadence of the tolling, he hears the echo of lives lived under the same weight, under the same scrutiny, and under the same harsh inevitabilities. He closes his eyes, attempting sleep, but the sound of the hall and the village are carried into his mind, woven into his dreams. He dreams of the Lord's gaze, of polished rings and scar tables, of the cold stone floor and the smell of sweat and tallow. He dreams of the bread, dark and heavy, and of water drawn from iron-smelling wells. He dreams of shadows and of corners where nothing stirs, yet everything watches. When morning comes, it will be the same. The bells will toll. The day will stretch forward slowly, indifferent to the lives it encompasses. Tasks will resume. Obedience will be measured. Hunger will persist. Yet in this repetition, there is also survival. The boy understands that one must navigate each day with quiet vigilance, with measured action, with a careful attention to the rhythm of the world around him. One misstep can be costly. One small success can be life-affirming. The hall, now empty, will wait to fill again. The town will breathe and move, as it always has. Snow may fall. Frost may bite. Wind may howl through the streets, but the structure of order and endurance will remain. And in the quiet corners of the village, in the small rooms and on the frost-hardened streets, lives continue, marked by memory, shaped by ritual, and sustained by the fragile certainty that, despite all, another day will come, and with it, the tolling of the bells that remind them who they are and who they must remain. The convent stands apart from the village, its walls pale as bone against the dark, whispering line of the forest. Silence presses here, thick and deliberate, broken only by the toll of bells that measure the day in steps of prayer and obedience. Each echo rolls down stone corridors and wooden rafters, settling on the shoulders of those who dwell within. The world outside continues in its chaotic rhythm, but inside, time is measured differently. Time is marked by devotion, by ritual, by the subtle, almost imperceptible shift of air as one soul moves past another in careful reverence. The air smells of wax, of ink, of damp parchment, and carries a faint, lingering sweetness from herbs hung to dry along rafters and beams. The convent is a place of preservation, both of knowledge and of bodies, though the two often feel interchangeable here. Every hand that touches vellum leaves behind a trace. Every scrape of quill, every careful brush of ink across a page is an attempt to preserve thought, belief, and memory against the erosion of time. A girl has been brought here not by desire, but by calculation. Her family could not provide what the world demanded, and the cloister offers a place for those deemed surplus to the worldly order. Dowries are expensive, and daughters without them are offered to God, or to the convent, which is often indistinguishable in terms of sacrifice. Her hair has been cut, falling in soft brown coils to the stone floor, a small offering of obedience without blood. She feels lighter and yet heavier at once, the weight of expectation pressing on her chest even as strands of hair brush her shoulders. The veil is placed over her head with hands that are both gentle and exacting. It settles like early snow, beautiful yet confining, protective yet suffocating. The girl repeats the Latin phrases taught to her, though they are hollow at first, shapes of sound rather than words carrying meaning. Syllables form on her tongue, rhythmic and repetitive, until sound becomes a shield against fear. Faith and fear blur, intertwined in a delicate balance she has yet to name. Meals are sparse, ritualized, and measured. Lent never ends here, though the calendar may suggest otherwise. Fish is a constant companion of the plate, often accompanied by thin gruel flavored with whatever vegetables survive the season. The smell of cooking clings to stone and wood, rising with smoke that finds every corner of the building. The sisters eat in silence or with quiet murmurs, voices low and cautious. For noise is both a sin and a signal of unrest. Some whispers speak of distant feasts, of life outside these walls, but they are quickly swallowed by habit and duty. At night, the dormitory becomes a place of quiet negotiation with fear and pain. The boards are hard, the blankets thin, and the air cold enough to bite exposed skin. Some sisters pray aloud, their voices tremulous yet steady. Others whisper regrets, recounting moments they wish could be erased. Faith here is a spectrum. A single flame for some, flickering and uncertain for others, smoldering embers for those who question or despair. The girl lies awake, listening to these sounds, the rhythm of breathing around her and the occasional creak of timbers settling under their own weight. Beyond the convent walls, the world moves with merciless pace. Plague is never far, rumor moving faster than carts, fast in the feet of those who carry food or message. A cough can mark a household, a rash an omen. The convent becomes its own protective shell, doors barred, prayers intensified, as though devotion could thicken the stone and timber against death itself. Yet no defense is absolute. Graves appear outside the gate, simple wooden crosses darkening in the mist, marking lives that were cared for and lost despite effort. The girl kneels in chapel, knees raw against stone, fingers clasped in exhaustion and hope. The crucifix above her is darkened with candle smoke, the face of Christ rendered both tender and accusing by layers of soot and devotion. She searches for comfort in the familiar shapes and words, but finds instead endurance, a quiet realization that holiness often feels like erasure. The ritual of kneeling, of repetition, of chant is not escape, it is survival, and survival often demands surrender. The bells toll again for Compline, signaling the closing of the day, yet also marking the narrowing of possibility. Candles flicker in holders, throwing long shadows that stretch like fingers across the stone walls. The girl traces one in particular with her eyes, noticing how it shifts, how it grows and shrinks as flame dances. The shadow seems alive, carrying with it fragments of fear, fragments of memory, fragments of everything she has left behind. It reminds her that even within walls devoted to devotion, nothing is static, nothing fully safe. She recalls her life before the convent, though the memory is fragmented and distant, like an echo from a dream. The market streets, the smell of fresh bread and livestock, the brief warmth of the sun unbroken by stone walls, all of it exists as shadow here. Her family faces pressures she no longer knows in detail. Debts, obligations, negotiations of marriage, and survival that she was too young to fully grasp. The convent has become both a refuge and a cage, offering structure and denial in equal measure. Outside, the forest waits in silence, its edges dark and indifferent. Wolves, foxes, and other creatures move unseen, creatures who know the rhythms of this land better than any human. Their presence is whispered in the wind through trees, in distant howls, in the occasional rustle of branches scraping against stone walls. The girl senses this world beyond the convent as alive, breathing, watching. It is indifferent, yet compelling, a reminder of freedom she may never hold. Inside, her days follow the cadence of bells. She rises for matins, kneels for prayer, copies texts, tends to small chores. She washes floors, polishes brass, arranges herbs, and observes the sisters in their movements. Their faces a study in patience, fear, and devotion. Observation becomes her teacher. She notices who moves without haste, who prays with visible doubt, who wields small authority over novices. These lessons, though unspoken, shape her understanding of survival and influence. Illness is a constant specter here as well. The air, damp and unchanging, invites fevers and colds, and the infirmary is a space of both hope and quiet terror. She watches a healer tend to those who fall ill, noticing the subtle gestures of care, the whispered prayers, the grim satisfaction or despair that accompanies each effort. Life is fragile. Each breath is temporary. Even within walls devoted to sanctity, mortality cannot be denied. When night falls fully, she sits in quiet reflection, hands folded, her head bowed. Candle smoke curls upward, filling the chapel with a haze that blurs edges, softens shadows, and carries the faint scent of herbs, wax, and stone. She reflects not on what she has gained, but on what she has survived. Survival in this place is a quiet skill, a negotiation between fear and faith, duty and hope. She has learned that obedience can be both safety and erasure, that silence and shield as effectively as walls, that endurance is often more sacred than triumph. She dreams, but dreams are never kind. They carry echoes of streets left behind, of hands once held, of laughter and grief interwoven in impossible patterns. In these dreams, she walks corridors that stretch endlessly, filled with doors she cannot open, and windows that look out on forests she cannot enter. The convent, familiar and protected by day, becomes labyrinthine at night. Shadows move on their own. Whispers belong neither to the living nor the dead. Yet she endures, as she must. With the first toll of the bells at matins, she awakens again, hands pressed over her mouth in the silent repetition of prayers she has learned by rote. She breathes in the scent of wax and parchment, listens to the muffled sounds of sisters rising, and steels herself for another day. Each day carries repetition, yet no day is truly the same. Lessons of observation and endurance continue, woven into every step, every gesture, every word spoken or left unspoken. The convent walls, pale and resolute, have seen countless lives pass through their gates. Each life has left an imprint, a trace in stone, wood, and memory. The girl becomes part of that continuum, her small acts of devotion, endurance, and attention forming layers of presence as significant as any she can yet perceive. Outside, the forest breathes, the winds whisper, and the world beyond the walls continues its ceaseless movement, indifferent to the lives contained within. Yet within these walls, time is both slower and more acute. Pain, hope, fear, and devotion are distilled into concentrated moments, and the girl absorbs them all. She learns the subtle power of attention, the strength found in quiet observation, the necessity of endurance, and the cost of small acts of disobedience or even thought. The convent is not merely a place of faith. It is a crucible where spirit, body, and mind are tested daily, where survival depends not only on obedience but on the ability to navigate unseen currents of influence and expectation. As night returns, candles gutter in the chapel, smoke curling upward to touch the vaulted ceiling. The girl kneels, listening to the wind press against the stone, imagining the world outside in all its chaos and freedom. She wonders if she will ever know it again, if she will ever feel warmth unmeasured, if she will ever move without ritual or constraint. But even in uncertainty, she knows this. She has endured, she continues, and she exists within a space where observation, patience, and quiet endurance are as sacred as prayer. And so, in the dim candlelight, in the chapel steeped with the smell of wax and herbs, with shadows stretching long and the tolling of bells marking the passage of time, the girl learns her oldest lesson yet, that holiness and survival are inseparable, that endurance is its own form of grace, and that even in confinement, even in fear, life continues, patient and demanding and worthy of every breath given to it. Winter has taken hold, and the road between settlements is no longer a path but a scar of ice and mud. Every footprint sinks and freezes, leaving evidence of movement that the cold will preserve long after the traveler has passed. The wind presses against cloaks and skin alike, sharp and relentless, cutting through layers of wool and leather as though testing the endurance of those who walk it. The traveler pulls his cloak tighter, the ruffle chafing against neck and face, and leans into the struggle, each step a negotiation with the ground that shifts beneath him. His boots are soaked, leather cracked and heavy with frozen water. Every movement is deliberate, measured. A small victory over the cold that wishes to claim him before the journey is even half complete. Inns are rare, scattered like precious jewels across the landscape, And even when found, their doors do not always promise warmth. Hospitality is conditional, carefully calculated, weighed against the ever-present fear of thieves and sickness. The traveler must prove himself worthy, presenting coin or labor, and offering a participation in the fragile covenant of shelter. Inside, the walls are low-ceilinged and thick with smoke, the air pungent with peat and dung fires. The scent clings to hair and beard, to the leather of boots and the folds of cloak. Fleas are as constant as conversation, moving through every crack and fold, unwelcome but inevitable. A fire burns low, its light flickering against darkened rafters and rough-hewn walls. The traveler sits on a bench, accepting a bowl of pottage passed across the table by a host whose eyes measure need against suspicion. The food is thick, heavy with cabbage, and whatever scraps survived winter. It is sustenance, but never comfort. Every bite carries the awareness of scarcity, of the precarious balance between hunger and survival, and the fleeting nature warmth in a world governed by winter and labor alike. Conversation is cautious. Words are chosen as carefully as steps along the icy road, each syllable weighed for its potential consequence. News travels here like contraband, whispers of war or famine, of lords who have fallen from favor and been erased from memory. Such information is as valuable as coin and equally dangerous if mishandled. The village itself is bound by duty and routine. Frost stiffens the fields, leaving plows idle and tools frozen in place. Oxen stand with clouded breasts, rising like smoke into gray sky, muscles tense and waiting for work that will not come until the sun rises higher, until the frost yields to labor. Women barter eggs, butter, or small possessions for salt, firewood, or candlelight. Every transaction is an exercise in negotiation and survival, small assertions of agency in a world that measures worth in obedience and compliance. Children gather sticks and kindling, warned constantly by elders of dangers that lie not only in the cold, but in the attention of strangers and the unpredictability of those older than themselves. Law is a slow and uncertain force in this place. Mounted messengers carry sealed parchments across frozen landscapes, delivering judgments and edicts shaped more by power and convenience than by fairness. Justice is uneven, a measure not of morality but of proximity to authority, literacy, and wealth. A stolen loaf may cost a hand, a stolen life may be spared for coin. The rules are known, but only partially, and survival depends on observing them closely, discerning which are enforced and which are merely suggestion. The traveler knows this well. Each step along the road is not only a movement through space, but a calculation of risk, a silent assessment of potential threats and reprieves. Evening approaches, the light fading into gray indistinguishable from fog. Wolves stir at the edges of the wood, their eyes glinting faintly as they watch and wait, patient and remorseless. Crows circle overhead, their wings beating against the cold air, indifferent observers of the human struggle below. The traveler continues on, cloak heavy, boots leaving tracks that may be followed or erased by the coming frost. His mind drifts to faces left behind, to obligations unmet, to sins whispered in moments of privacy. Memory blends with survival. Recollection becomes caution, and caution becomes instinct. Night settles fully, and with it comes another kind of danger. The road narrows into shadows, indistinct and threatening. Trees loom overhead, their branches scraping against one another, producing sounds like whispers or warnings. Every rustle of snow-laden leaves is amplified by the mind trained to anticipate threat. A sudden snap of a branch can be a warning of human presence or the movement of animals, both of which can be deadly in this frozen landscape. The traveler grips the small knife at his belt, not out of expectation of attack, but for the comfort of readiness. It is a talisman against helplessness, a small assertion of control in a world governed by forces beyond his command. Sleep, when it comes, is restless and broken, taken in bursts beside the fire of some inn or in the lee of a barn. Dreams are filled with the road, its ice and mud, the eyes of strangers, the flicker of distant lights promising both comfort and danger. He recalls the faces of those who have passed, the fleeting warmth of heart that is not his own, the cold and weight of snow and ice pressing against his body even in rest. The mind does not relinquish vigilance. It cannot. In this age, rest is tentative, survival is uncertain, and the road remembers every footstep long after the traveler has moved on. Dawn comes reluctantly. The frost sparkles briefly, diamonds in a world otherwise gray and unyielding. Smoke curls from chimneys, the smell of burning wood, and peat mingling with the crisp, metallic tang of ice. The traveler rises again, body stiff, face numb, boots heavy. The road stretches before him, a relentless measure of endurance and caution. His movements are deliberate, his pace measured, because each step is not simply progress. It is a declaration of survival, a quiet assertion that he remains, for now, untouched by fate or misfortune. The village behind him wakes slowly. Life continues under the same constraints, the same patterns, the same dangers. Women dress children in layers of cloth that offer inadequate warmth. Oxen strain against frozen plows, and men check fences and thatched roofs with the precision of long-practiced habit. The day will demand labor, obedience, vigilance. Failure is never excused, success rarely rewarded. Every action carries consequence, visible or hidden. The traveler steps into this rhythm, part observer, part participant, always cautious, always alert. At midday, the cold intensifies. Clouds gather and release a dusting of snow that collects on shoulders and hair, softening sounds and blurring edges. Every movement becomes more laborious, every breath a visible testament to endurance. The road becomes slippery, the mud beneath ice a hidden trap. Horses stumble, carts skid, travelers fall and rise with grim determination. The air carries a faint smell of iron and smoke, of burning wood and frozen earth, marking the passage of life and labor in a world unforgiving in its seasons. Evening approaches once more, darker than before, thick with the weight of accumulated snow and frost. The traveler seeks shelter early, understanding the cost of exposure, the lethality of underestimating winter's reach. The inn's door opens reluctantly to him, creaking under centuries of frost and weather. Inside, warmth presses against his wet cloak, and he is reminded that survival is sometimes measured in moments as simple as proximity to fire. A bowl of pottage is passed, and though the flavor is bland, it is sustenance, a reprieve, a temporary victory. Night falls completely, the wind cutting through cracks and along stone walls, its howl echoing to the valleys and across frozen fields. Wolves answer in the distance, voices stretched long and mournful, a reminder of the wild that surrounds human settlement. He lies near the fire, boots removed, cloak drying, yet vigilance remains. Every shadow in the room, every creak of timber, every cough or sigh carries potential significance. Dreams, when they come, are as restless as the night itself, filled with roads, frost, wolves, and the faint glimmer of warmth fleetingly offered by strangers' hearts. In these hours, he understands what the medieval road demands: endurance, observation, humility, and patience. Each day is a test, each night a reminder of mortality and chance. Life moves slowly, yet relentlessly, shaped by cold, hunger, law, and the constant negotiation with both human and natural forces. Survival is not heroic. It is pragmatic, and the lessons learned here, on the icy road and in the dim warmth of inns, are often unspoken, imprinted on a mind and body through repetition and necessity. By dawn, he rises once more, stepping into the pale, hesitant light, the road stretching before him like a scar that remembers every traveler who has walked it before. Snow crunches beneath boots, frost sparkles briefly, and smoke from distant chimneys curls upward, promising warmth, but never certainty. The world waits, indifferent, its demands unyielding. He walks on, carrying memory, caution, and hope, for in this age, movement itself is both mercy and hazard, and the road remembers every step long after the traveler has passed. The village healer's hut stands at the edge of memory and danger, just beyond the last fence, where pigs root and children are warned not to linger. Its walls are rough-hewn timber, weathered gray by seasons of rain and sun, and the roof sags slightly under the weight of time. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney, carrying with it the pungent scent of herbs, sage, thyme, wormwood, and the lingering tang of dried blood from past treatments. Inside, bundles of herbs hang from the rafters, leaves brittle and fragrant, releasing sharp green scents that mingle with the smoke from a hearth. Mortar and pestle grind roots and bark into paste, powders, and salves, each mixture a hope pressed into a vessel, an act of defiance against the fragile hold humans have on life. The healer moves with quiet precision, Her hands, rough and stained from years of preparation, carry a rhythm born of necessity. She does not hurry, for haste is dangerous when dealing with flesh and illness. She whispers prayers under her breath, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in the village dialect, a hedge against failure. Superstition and faith are inseparable here, a charm sewn into a sleeve, a prayer whispered into a poultice, the alignment of herbs on a windowsill. Each carries weight. Each is a small act of protection or hope. Sickness arrives without invitation. It creeps silently through homes, carried in coughs, in water, in the very air, leaving thin bodies shivering and trembling. Fevers burn relentlessly. Skin flushes, eyes glassy with the heat of infection. Children lie on straw-stuffed pallets, ribs sharp beneath the thin linen that covers them. The healer tends to them, applying poultices, drawing blood when necessary, binding wounds with strips of cloth softened by water and careful hands. Success brings quiet gratitude, whisper in tones that carry both relief and fear. Failure brings suspicion, the ever-present danger that knowledge itself can be judged a crime. The church watches. Miracles belong to God alone. A healer's skill, even when life is saved, is viewed with wary eyes, as the act itself can encroach on divine providence. Women who hold knowledge walk a narrow path, balancing necessity against accusation. A single misstep, a charm left too long in a window, a prayer spoken too loudly, a remedy that fails, can shift perception from protection to heresy. Every patient is both trust and risk, every treatment both a blessing and a potential indictment. The villagers come to her not only for healing, but for answers. Feverish bodies are accompanied by questions, sometimes desperate, sometimes petty. The healer listens, evaluates, and applies what she knows, always aware of the unseen eyes of the church and the invisible line between medicine and magic. Her hands are steady, though her heart is not. She feels the weight of each life she touches, the fragility of hope, the sharp sting of mortality pressing close. The hut is both sanctuary and crucible. Fires burn low, smoke curling around beams, filling the small space with warmth that never fully reaches the corners. Jars of leeches writhe in darkened shelves, ready to draw blood when the balance of humors demands it. Pots bubble over with decoctions, their smell bitter and medicinal, masking but never eliminating the scent of decay carried in from those who arrive too late. Each day is a test of endurance, patience, and skill. Mistakes are rarely forgiven. They leave scars on memory and sometimes on flesh. At night, she counts her stores. Dried herbs, powders, roots. Each one is precious, a token against future suffering. Her fingers are stained with the memory of countless past treatments, nails cracked from labor and contact with bitter plant matter. She eats alone, bread dipped in thin broth, listening to the wind as it presses against the thatch and the hollow spaces around the beams. Darkness gathers outside, full of the stories that end badly for those who know too much, who touch life and death with hands capable but unprotected by status or favor. Beyond the walls, the village sleeps uneasily. The cold bites deeper at night, frost glinting faintly in moonlight, turning fields into mirrors of sky. Wolves move along the edges of forests, their eyes reflective, patient, indifferent to human lives. Illness waits in homes, quiet and unseen, moving from breath to breath, from skin to skin. The healer is both sentinel and participant, straddling the line between protection and exposure, hope and fear. When dawn breaks, she rises again. The fire is rekindled, the mortar and pestle ready. Patients arrive with thin voices and heavy eyes, bringing with them their sickness, their doubts, and their faith. Some come in desperation, some in suspicion, all with the understanding that survival often depends on the skill she possesses, tempered with secrecy, prayer, and vigilance. She measures doses carefully, applies hands gently, murmurs incantations beneath the surface of spoken Latin. Every gesture is calculated, every word deliberate. Life and death are intertwined here, and she moves between them as one walking a narrow ledge over a deep, invisible abyss. Children cough, their small bodies trembling. A mother clutches her wrist, her nails pressing into pale skin, a quiet plea for the healer to succeed. She places her hands on the child, feeling the heat and the weight, murmuring words that are part medicine, part prayer. She applies poultices of crushed herbs, binds the limbs with linen soaked in water and vinegar, whispers charms sewn into clothing, all while keeping one eye on the subtle signs, the pulse, the eyes, the breathing. Her mind works constantly, weighing cause and effect, superstition and science, survival and inevitability. The church bell tolls in the distance. Each strike is a reminder that mercy has limits, that mortality is sanctioned, and that even within sacred walls, human hands are bound by law, custom, and fear. She acknowledges the toll with a bowed head, a silent prayer for guidance and endurance. In this world, even acts of compassion are measured. Even skill is scrutinized. The healer's life is one of balance, walking between shadows and light, knowledge and ignorance, hope and despair. By midday, the sun has shifted, throwing light through the small window of her hut. Dust motes hang suspended in the golden shaft, catching in the strands of her hair and the folds of her clothing. Each particle is illuminated, a reminder of the minute details that make life perceptible, survivable, and occasionally beautiful. She pauses to breathe, to rest her hands, to let herself feel the weight of her labor and the magnitude of what is entrusted to her. Her eyes move to the jars on the shelves, the bundles of dried herbs, the worn surfaces of her work tables. Each object carries history, care, and intention, silent witnesses to the fragile persistence of life. Afternoon shadows lengthen, and the healer steps outside to gather more herbs, the wind biting at her exposed face. She moves deliberately, choosing plants for their known properties, her fingers brushing frost from leaves and stems. Each step is mindful, careful, because the world beyond her walls is unforgiving. Paths are uneven, animals roam. The cold seeps into every joint. Yet she persists, for inaction carries its own cost. The gathered herbs are carried back, bundled, and hung to dry, ready for the next need, the next patient, the next test of endurance. Night returns, heavier than before, and she settles once more into the small warmth of her hut. Fires burn low, jars rattle softly as they shift in their places, and the wind presses against the walls as though testing their integrity. She eats little, her attention focused on preparations for those who will come with the first light. Every moment of rest is brief, every act of care deliberate. She has learned that mercy survives not because it is safe, but because it is necessary. In the quiet hours, she reflects on the unsettling truths of her work. Life is fragile. Death is constant. Suffering is often public and unremarkable. Her skill offers temporary reprieve, but it is never absolute. She touches life, preserves it, negotiates with fate itself, but knows the world will claim its due sooner or later. Yet she endures, because endurance is the only form of certainty in a world governed by chance, cold, and the unseen currents of disease and human will. When dawn comes again, she will rise, her hands ready, her mind alert, her heart prepared. She will attend to the sick, administer remedies, whisper prayers, and move with deliberate purpose through the fragile lives entrusted to her care. She will continue to walk the narrow path between hope and fear, knowledge and suspicion, mercy and mortality, because this is her calling, her burden, and her survival. And in this quiet, relentless devotion, she understands the harshest, most unsettling truth of her age, that compassion is dangerous, survival is tenuous, and the smallest act of care are often the most heroic. Night settles over the castle like a held breath, thick and almost tangible, pressing against stone walls and arrow slits with a weight that seems older than time itself. Torches flare along the ramparts, their smoke curling upward to mingle with the chill air, staining the stones with dark, shifting veil. Every corridor echoes with the soft, deliberate movements of those who inhabit it. Guards shifting their posts, servants padding barefoot to avoid notice, the quiet clatter of keys and locks marking the rhythm of surveillance. Power does not sleep easily here. It listens, watches, waits, and demands attention even in absence. In a small chamber deep within the keep, a prisoner sits on straw that presses unevenly into his back. His hands are bound with rough rope, the fibers cutting into the skin as they hold him in place. Chains lie across the floor, cold and unyielding, symbols of both punishment and inevitability. He listens to the sounds of the castle above and around him, the muffled laughter of feasting nobles, the scrape of shoes on stone, the distant clang of metal from the armory. Time stretches in this room. Thick and slow, each heartbeat an echo of past missteps and present fear. The prisoner has learned quickly that law here is as much about perception as about truth. Confessions are prized, even extracted, not always for the sake of justice, but to maintain order and display authority. The instruments waiting in the next chamber are shaped to compel compliance. Iron devices designed to persuade flesh when speech fails. He knows this, feels in the tension in his muscles, the rapid pulse in his throat. Fear is not an abstraction here. It is a constant companion, alive in the air, crawling into thought and memory. A chaplain enters, his steps quiet against the stone floor. He carries a single candle, its flame flickering and casting the prisoner's shadow against the wall. The figure stretches tall and distorted, limbs elongated into grotesque forms by the wavering light, as if the soul itself were attempting to escape the confines of the body. The chaplain murmurs words of absolution in Latin, offering salvation while the mortal fate of the prisoner hangs in the balance. The sound is meant to comfort, yet it carries an unspoken warning. Divine grace does not always protect against earthly judgment. The air in the cell smells of damp straw, unwashed cloth, and the faint iron tang of old blood, reminders of countless lives pressed into these walls before him. He shifts, uncomfortable, feeling the roughness of the straw bite into his skin, listening to the drip of water somewhere unseen, counting the faint scurrying of rats along the edges of the room. Each sound is amplified in the silence, each echo a reminder of isolation and vulnerability. There is no comfort here, only the steady accumulation of tension, a suspended awareness that time itself has slowed in anticipation of what is to come. Memory intrudes into consciousness. The prisoner recalls the moments that led to this place. Words spoken in haste, observations ignored, alliances made and broken. In the medieval world, the line between guilt and survival is thin and often invisible. A misplaced glance, a whispered rumor, a misjudged loyalty can be the difference between life and death. He thinks of faces left behind, friends, family, companions, all now distant, unreachable. The weight of absence presses alongside the weight of chains. Above, the sounds of celebration continue. The Lord feasts with nobles, the aroma of roasted meat and fresh bread drifting faintly down through floors and walls. Laughter and clinking cups create a contrast that sharpens the prisoner's awareness of his vulnerability. Outside the cell, life continues, indifferent to individual suffering, indifferent to fear. The contrast is a cruel lesson, a demonstration of power, an unspoken assertion that authority moves beyond morality or mercy. Hours pass. The prisoner tries to still his body, slow his breathing, quiet the thoughts that threaten to overwhelm him. He measures the passage of time by the candle's flame, by the echoes of distant footsteps, by the rhythm of his own heart. Every minute is a test of endurance. Every sound a reminder that he exists at the mercy of forces larger than himself. The mind, stripped of distraction, becomes hyper-aware. Imagination fills the empty spaces with threats and possibilities, blending memory, fear, and hope into a single, inescapable presence. The chaplain returns briefly, offering water and murmuring prayers. Each act of kindness is both relief and reminder. He is alive, but barely, and salvation may not extend protection from the decisions made by men above. The chains bite anew when he moves, a physical embodiment of the weight of judgment. He shifts to ease the pain, grimacing against the discomfort, and notices the faint scratch of a rat's claw along the stone. Small things assume a disproportionate significance. Every sound, smell, and touch becomes a thread of awareness, a measure of his own survival. Darkness thickens in the corners of the room as the candle wanes. Shadows gather and stretch, carrying shapes that are sometimes memory, sometimes imagination. He recalls other prisoners he has seen, tales whispered in markets or along roadsides, people stripped of agency, subjected to the whims of authority, caught between survival and obedience. He thinks of the injustices that remain unrecorded, the sufferings that fade into the walls of castles and dungeons, unnoticed by history, but indelibly imprinted on the living. The prisoner closes his eyes, attempting to find solace in meditation, prayer, or memory. Thoughts drift to small comforts, a piece of bread, the warmth of a sunlit field, the sound of a river. Yet these memories are fleeting, fragile, reminders of what is no longer accessible. Fear returns with greater force, sharpened by silence and darkness, by the knowledge that tomorrow or the next hour may bring punishment, revelation, or release. Each possibility is equally daunting. The castle itself is alive in this time. Every stone holds memory. Every corridor has known fear. Every torch has witnessed suffering. The prisoner feels the weight of history pressing upon him, as if the walls themselves remember centuries of judgment and endurance. He imagines the lives that came before him, people whose cries and confessions still echo faintly, absorbed into the fabric of stone and timber. This awareness is both oppressive and oddly comforting. He is part of a continuum, a small presence in the long history of the place. Hours blur. Hunger gnaws at him, not immediate but persistent, a dull ache beneath the sharp edge of fear. Water is offered sparingly, bread only in measured quantities. Every act of sustenance is layered with meaning, an acknowledgement of life, a reminder of dependence, a tool to maintain compliance. The prisoner notes each gesture carefully, memorizing rhythm and habit, understanding that even the smallest details may influence survival. Midnight approaches. Bells toll faintly from a distant tower, each strike a reminder of the passage of time in a world that moves indifferent to suffering. He counts the strikes, aligns them with his heartbeat, and finds a strange rhythm in the regularity. The sound is at once soothing and alien, a bridge between the order above and the chaos within the cell. Outside, life continues. Inside, he remains suspended between fear and endurance, caught in the delicate tension that defines his existence. He remembers the faces that will not return, the friends betrayed by circumstance, the family left behind. He recalls the choices that seemed small at the time, but have led inexorably to this moment. In medieval justice, truth is pliable, shaped by perception and power. Confession is valued above accuracy, compliance above honesty. The prisoner internalizes this knowledge, understanding that survival may require more than courage. It may demand obedience, patience, and the ability to endure without complaint. The candle flickers, guttering in the stale air. Shadows dance along the walls, stretching and contracting, creating shapes that mimic memory, fear, and imagination. The prisoner's own shadow looms, distorted, a giant in his own creation, reminding him of the fragility of flesh and the endurance of the mind. He breathes slowly, counting, observing, preparing for whatever may come. Outside, the stars burn coldly and indifferent in the night sky. Below, in the stone confines of the castle, breath fogs the air. Chains rattle softly with each shift, and water drips intermittently, a steady, persistent sound that marks the passage of time. The prisoner realizes that the unsettling truth of his world is the ordinariness of suffering. It is systematic, sanctioned, woven into stone, ritual, and law, and it persists regardless of merit, innocence, or prayer. When dawn eventually creeps over battlements, light will filter into the corridors and cells, indifferent and impartial. Guards will continue their watch, servants will deliver provisions, and the cycle will begin anew. The prisoner remains alive, but survival is merely the first act in a story that may end in mercy or in doom. Each breath, each heartbeat, each flicker of consciousness is both a victory and a reminder. In this age, endurance is as sacred as courage, and life is sustained by vigilance, patience, and the relentless negotiation with forces far beyond any single human will. The river runs gray beneath the skies swollen with clouds, moving with a current that carries both debris and memory. Frost coats the reeds along the bank, each blade sharp as a knife against gloved fingers. A lone ferryman pulls his boat along with slow, deliberate strokes, each movement measured against the tug of the river, against the weight of water and ice pressing below. The wood creaks, swollen with moisture, and water laps faintly at the sides, murmuring secrets of those who have traveled these paths before him. Each ripple carries a history of the land, of lives lived and lost, of decisions made and consequences endured. The village near the river is small, nestled in the crook of a bend, its buildings clustered together like birds seeking warmth. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood, cooked grains, and the faint tang of the river itself. The streets are narrow, rutted with carts and mud, glistening with frost that refuses to yield to the weak winter sun. Children play cautiously, their laughter sharp against the air, yet always tempered by the warnings of elders who know the dangers of cold and river alike. Every movement in the village is careful, deliberate, a negotiation with survival itself. The ferryman has seen much in his time. He knows the faces of those who will cross and those who will never return. He knows the subtle shifts of wind and water that signal danger. Hidden shoals, sudden currents, the threat of ice breaking loose from upstream. His hands are calloused, fingers etched with lines from rope and oar, and yet they move with the precision of a man who has spent a lifetime observing rhythm, weight, and resistance. Each day is repetition, yet each moment demands vigilance. The river does not forgive negligence. Beyond the village, the forests press close, dark and indifferent. Wolves move silently among the trees. Foxes slip along frozen streams, and birds circle overhead, their cries a sharp counterpoint to the low murmur of the river. The ferryman senses them in the wind, in the rustle of branches, in the subtle shift of light across ice. The world is alive in ways that are both beautiful and dangerous. Survival requires understanding this life, not merely enduring it. People come to the river for many reasons: trade, passage, news from distant settlements. They carry bundles, sacks of grain, chickens wrapped in cloth, letters bound with twine. Some travel for necessity, some for hope, some to escape consequences that have already caught up with them. The ferryman reads each traveler carefully, noting hesitations, gestures, the weight they place on the boat. Each crossing is a test of trust, of skill, of endurance. The river is impartial. It neither favors nor punishes. It simply moves, and those who cross it must respect its power. The villagers rely on the ferryman as much as they fear the river. He is a conduit between worlds, the settled land behind and the unknown beyond. Some whisper stories of those who disappeared mid-crossing, of currents that claimed life without prejudice, of storms that appeared suddenly, thrashing the river and all within reach. These tales are never entirely believed, yet they serve their purpose: to remind everyone that the water is alive, aware, and eternal. The ferryman listens, says little, letting his actions speak where words are insufficient. At dusk, mist rises from the river like pale ghosts, curling around a boat and banks, obscuring vision and heightening tension. The ferryman pauses, resting the oar in the water, listening to the soft hiss of moving ice and the distant cry of a heron. Shadows stretch long, merging water and sky into a single gray expanse. Travelers cling to the sides of the boat, shivering from cold, fear, or anticipation. The mist is both protective and menacing, hiding shoals and rocks, yet softening the eyes of those who cross, masking their vulnerability in the embrace of gray. The river carries more than water. It carries disease, rumor, and news. A cough spreads silently along its banks. A whispered secret travels faster than any boat. The ferryman knows this. His attention is never merely on the oar, the boat, or the river, but on the subtle signs of danger in bodies and eyes, in gestures and tone. Survival here is more than avoiding the currents. It is navigating human uncertainty, gauging trust, and reading small, nearly imperceptible cues. One traveler, a woman with a child bundled tightly against her chest, boards the boat. She smells faintly with smoke and herbs, her cloak stiff with frost. Her eyes are wide with fear and determination, tracking every movement of the ferryman, measuring him as much as he measures her. The child sleeps lightly, head tucked into her mother's shoulder, unaware of the dangers both seen and unseen. The ferryman shifts his stance, adjusting the oar, ensuring balance, monitoring every subtle tilt of the boat. Movement is deliberate. A wrong step could cast him into the icy current. A wrong gesture could spark panic. The river begins to quicken. Upstream, ice shifts with sudden weight, sending vibrations through the water that ripple under the boat. The ferryman leans into the oar, muscles straining against resistance, eyes scanning the gray expanse for danger. He knows the river intimately, where it hides shoals, where it deepens, where it twists and turns in ways that can end a life in an instant. The woman grips the side of the boat, sensing the subtle increase in tension, the quiet power beneath her feet. Each passing second stretches long, the water demanding attention, respect, vigilance. The boat moves slowly but inevitably, carrying its fragile cargo forward. Mist thickens, obscuring banks, trees, and any landmarks. The ferryman's instincts guide him. The oar strikes water with rhythmic precision, carving a path through gray that might be mistaken for emptiness but is full of hidden threat. Silence reigns, punctuated only by the faint lapping of water against the hull and the occasional distant cry of a bird. Each sound is amplified in the mist, carrying meaning beyond its mere presence. The journey is a test of endurance and patience. The ferryman senses every change, the way the boat lifts with weight, the subtle shifts in current, the pressure of frost building along edges, the faint resistance of ice just beneath the surface. Travelers remain quiet, aware of their dependence on his knowledge and skill. Fear is a shared companion, tangible in the tightened hands, in the shallow breaths, in the stiffened posture of those aboard. The river enforces humility. Arrogance or haste can be fatal. Night falls fully. The mist thickens, swallowing shapes and sound. The ferryman trusts instincts honed over decades. The subtle change in water flow, the faint echo of trees against ice, the temperature shift that signals an approaching storm. He navigates with care, understanding that survival depends not on force but on observation, timing, and respect for the world he moves through. The woman holds a child closer, sensing the rhythm of the boat, the cadence of ferryman's strokes, the tension that lies beneath each movement. When dawn finally approaches, pale and reluctant, the mist begins to lift.